VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are on the May 5th edition. It's my father's birthday. He turns, 61 today. My uncle was born on the same day, 1 year later. So he is 60 today. Boom. That's a little factoids about my family. May 5th. Vikings football is about 4 months away. The NFL regular season starts in 125 days, and we just got done with the NFL draft. And I think across the board, the draft powers that be, the talking heads, the pundits, kind of gave the Vikings a generalized B for the Addison pick. I think the reason it didn't get an A is because the second pick of the event, Mekhi Blackmon, was a third rounder that probably could have been scooped out of round 5 or 6. I think that's where the enthusiasm dipped. But it's weird because nobody really has any beef with Blackmon. In fact, a lot of folks are warming up to him. I think, was it Brett Coleman? On his show, or in a tweet, he said that he thinks Blackmon can start over Andrew Booth by Halloween, I think he said. So we got a lot of Blackmon's enthusiasm. And then on those draft grades, whether it's a B or whatever they assign, nobody takes into account that TJ Hawkinson, by default or a de facto situation, was the Vikings' second pick. And I know that's not really fair to say. This veteran was part of the draft, but that's what the Vikings spent their second rounder on, and he didn't even cost a second rounder. It was a pick swap, so basically through 3 rounds of draft capital, the Vikings got TJ Hawkinson from the Lions. So that's a long setup to get to this point. I want to talk generally about the Vikings offseason, and I've titled this one, What is the Mount Rushmore of this offseason? Basically it's the 4 most influential things in my home state. This is where Mount Rushmore is. It's about 4 or 5 hours from here. So let's go through the Mount Rushmore of this Vikings offseason. And a caveat, it's not done yet. There could be some rim-rattling transaction that happens any minute or this summer. It'd have to be some sort of trade. I don't think there's anybody that could be signed from free agency that would be that big of a deal now. The free agent wire is pretty picked over. But yeah, there's always, Adolfo Mensa showed last summer, he's not afraid to wheel and deal. He got Jalen Reagor, Ross Blacklock, and then in November, the aforementioned Hawkinson. So the guy likes to trade. I don't think the roster is a finished product, but we know, what do we think? We're probably about 90% of the way there. So I think it's fair to look back and think, what were the biggest items of the offseason? So these are in no particular order. I mean, you can assign the president if you'd like, with George Washington starting at I guess if you're looking at a photo of it all the way on the left. Not sure which direction that is. I've only been there once to Mount Rushmore. The first one I have assigned as George Washington of the Mount Rushmore is Brian Flores, the hire of that man as defensive coordinator to take over for Ed Donatel, who was dismissed after 1 season. In 2022, somehow, this football team right here went 13-4 with a defense ranked 27th via DVOA, 30th in points allowed, and 31st in yards allowed, and won the division. Had a wimpy showing in the postseason, but still won 13 games with a very bad defense. There were times during the season, especially, against the Commanders and Bills in those back-to-back weeks in November, where the defense started to gain its footing, or so we thought, and it was like, all right, they're turning the corner, they don't look horrible. And then that turned out to be false. Them playing well in those games wasn't false, but it was not an indicator of what was to come. So on the whole, the Vikings defense needed improvement after a pretty impressive 2022 season. Because you can't go win a Super Bowl if you're ranked 30th in points allowed. It just doesn't work that way. So Kevin O'Connell said, all right, Mr. Donatel, we're going in a different direction. We love you. You're a good dude. But we're going with Brian Flores for the foreseeable future, although it could be a one and done because he'll be in the mix for head coaching jobs before you know it. But the reason that this is so damn vital, the reason it's a Mount Rushmore item for Flores is the way that this roster looks on defense now. The only way that I am comfortable with it, or that you should be feeling secure at all with it, is because Brian Flores is in charge. There was a possibility, or probably a temptation, that they could have plucked some whippersnapper, up-and-comer, coordinator, assistant from somewhere. If it was Kevin O'Connell in charge, it was probably going to be some guy that he had ties to with the Rams or the Commanders, and then, an assistant linebackers coach. Give him his first job with the Vikings. If that would have been the gig, you can put any name on the guy that you want, and this was the defensive roster, we would be panicked to all hell right now. It's only because Brian Flores is in charge of the roster that I think most of us were like, well, it'll probably be better. It's probably not going to be a top 10 type of defense, but it's going to get out from, the armpit of the NFL, ranked 27th in DVOA and 31st in yards allowed. And the only reason that I feel that way right now, or that you should, is because Brian Flores is in charge, and he doesn't really do bad defenses. Now, his first season in Miami was iffy, but that was one of the, we're tanking whether you like it or not, Mr. Flores gigs. Let's face it. Patrick Peterson, Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendricks, Duke Shelley, they left. That's a lot of red meat to leave an organization with aspirations to improve. In fact, for folks that don't watch Vikings football and are like a Ravens fan or something, they would see those guys leaving the team and be like, holy shit, this defense is not going to be very good. They lost all of their veteran players. Somehow, though, we've blended this mentality of getting younger, faster, more affordable, and then meaner once Lewisine gets back, that it's going to work. And the only reason that you should feel that way, that there's going to be a pronounced improvement, is because Brian Flores is in charge. If it was some anonymous guy that you've never heard of, we'd be really freaked right now. What are they doing? They subtracted people from the defense. So the mentality is to utilize speed, youth, and affordability. And thankfully, Brian Flores is in charge, a man with a documented history from the Bill Belichick tree to make this thing work. So beyond the shadow of a doubt, that's my first thing on Mount Rushmore for the Vikings offseason. The next one is the acquisition, the free agent signing of Byron Murphy. I think I personally equally as much enjoy Marcus Davenport being signed. It was a splashy move for a guy who's hungry to put the Saints' career behind him and start fresh at number 0, literally number 0, his jersey number with the Vikings. But Murphy, as it turns out, now that we have all of the free agent signings in the rear view about 2 months now, Murphy was a necessity, because if you didn't have him in the cornerback room, you would be staring at Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, Mekhi Blackman, Jawan Williams, Tay Gowan, and going, ooh, here we go. No Duke Shelley. He's not coming back. In fact, the Vikings play him next year. Patrick Peterson's long gone. Thank God that they were able to sign Byron Murphy, a guy with a documented track record of being a good cornerback, a feisty cornerback, wanted to get the hell out of the desert, and now he plays for the Vikings. But when you look at now the roadmap that was constructed for the Vikings offseason, having Flores a part of that was vital. It was utterly essential, because I thought they would sign 2 or 3 cornerbacks. Yeah, Shaquille Griffin, go get him. Rock Ya-Sin, he just signed with the Ravens. Could have got him. And you could have had, going into the draft, not having a cornerback need because you had all of these guys. But that wasn't the case. So through their actions, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah told us that the Vikings like who they have at cornerback. You got Byron Murphy, thank God. And then, hey, we just drafted Andrew Booth. We don't think he's destined to be injured all the time, like some of you might. Caleb Evans, if he can get his concussions figured out, he looked pretty darn good in spots. And then Jawan Williams is kind of a lottery ticket. I'm not sure if he'll make the active roster. And then Mekhi Blackman, with third-round draft capital, should get some snaps. But this would be very eerie if Byron Murphy wasn't on the team. He's the one driving force for stability, and he's not even like a lockdown corner. He's just a pretty good one. Without him, oh boy, it'd be nerve-wracking. So 2 defensive things to start off the show. Number 1, Brian Flores in the saddle, and then Byron Murphy. Now that we know that was really the only free agent solution at cornerback, the big name, thank goodness that he came aboard. They also signed John Reed, a young journeyman from the Falcons. Played for the Titans, Seahawks, and one other team I can't remember right now. But who knows if he'll make the roster. All of a sudden, there's like 11 cornerbacks on the Vikings roster, and only 5 or 6 can make it. So I'm not sure that they're going to go get anybody else, like Shaquille Griffin or Marcus Peters, who's still out there. The next one, I'd be remiss if I didn't put, let's see, whose head would this? This would be Theodore Roosevelt's head on Mount Rushmore. Jordan Addison, the draft pick. The Vikings, surprisingly, to me and to a lot of you, stayed put at the 23rd pick and flat out said, we understand our defense isn't great, but that doesn't really bug us. We do offense in these parts. We are the Norsemen who, promote taking the top off the defense, so we're going to draft Jordan Addison. And the number one thing that this does is increasingly, as feisty defensive coordinators decide that we're going to take away Justin Jefferson and make somebody else beat you, now that's Addison. It's not a diminished Adam Thielen. It's not KJ Osborne. It's going to be a 21-year-old Jordan Addison who's going to be that guy. I don't know if he'll win WR2 right away in September. I guess I'm scarred from the Zimmer days when the rookies have to prove it during the regular season. But he should. And as he matures and develops, hopefully right away in September and October, he's going to be a snazzy weapon that when Jefferson is, other teams sell out to tame him, you'll have their finest Jordan Addison to take relief off of the passing game. Because you saw when the other team last year said, all right, we're going to neutralize Jefferson with 2 or 3 defensive backs on him, the Vikings didn't win games. And what that should normally be is an invitation to use your other weapons, and it just so happened that in 2022, Adam Thielen wouldn't cut it. At least it didn't work for winning games, that when they sold out to stop Jefferson, you couldn't pivot to anybody else aside from TJ Hockenson. Addison changes that. The Vikings have made an emphatic statement that this is an offense-first enterprise, whether you like it or not. We are going to throw the ball a lot, and we have a very promising playmaker in Addison who's coming aboard that, who knows, and perhaps he'll be able to snag 1,000 yards in his first season. He's already got a little bit of Rookie of the Year attention. I think he's 7th in the Vegas odds right now. But we had 8 years of Mike Zimmer, and it was unabashedly a defense-first enterprise. You remember the Zimmer blueprint, especially when it was working. It was to get up in a game about 21-7, hopefully for their sake 24-7, and then do nothing. Just suffocate them with defense, win 24-14, win 24-17, and get the hell out of Dodge with the win. That's not going to be the case anymore. This is going to be throw, throw, throw. And by the way, we've got 5 running backs now, especially if Dalvin Cook stays on the team. We're going to run it a little bit more. We're going to be balanced. But offense is on the billboard. It's on the new storefront, because if it wasn't, they could have gone safe and drafted Joey Porter or Deontay Banks cornerbacks, which, in my opinion, is a roster need. So Jordan Addison coming aboard was a Mount Rushmore-like cornerstone moment for the Vikings offseason, because it proved that we're doing offense around here, and we got Brian Flores and his youngsters to do the rest. Finally, number 4, this would be Abraham Lincoln on the Mount Rushmore, is the flexibility that Adolfo-Mensah set himself up for next year. When he came aboard last year, and arguably a bit this year, he had what he had. Now, he's moved a lot of those veteran contracts that were considered a little bit of a scarlet letter. They were fat and bloated, the contracts, not the people. Adam Thielen's, Eric Kendricks, Dalvin Tomlinson got a lot of money from the Browns. And so he said we're going in a different direction. And I think I did a show on this about a month ago. 35 guys are slated for free agency next year. So next, March 10th or so. And this year it was half that, 18. So if the Vikings want to completely flip the script next year, they now have the flexibility to do that, especially because they have an extended Kirk Cousins. We have not existed in a realm of Vikings football in 5 years without being committed to a large next year Kirk Cousins commitment. Now, we have that financially a little bit in 2024 with the dead cap that was shoved, but it's $28.5 million, and by the time, if they do move on from Cousins, you draft a rookie quarterback, and that's kind of a wash for the first year. And then in 2025, you get the benefit of the rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, baby. But right now, this is the first time since at the end of 2017 where you look on the horizon of the Vikings quarterback situation, and there's not a lot of money tied to one person, and that was always Kirk Cousins. So because you have the theoretical money of Cousins cap coming off the books before too long, and then you have 35 men slated for free agency, Adolfo-Mensah has total flexibility to do what he pleases next offseason. He had some of that while he was gaining his footing last year and some of it this year, but it won't be like next year. Next year, he has a blank canvas. And this is why you see all over Twitter, all over the internet, the Vikings got a lot of cap space next year, baby. We're going to be just like the Bears. We got all this money to spend. Well, yeah, but that's because you're getting a whole new team if you want it. If you sign back 10 or 12 guys that are slated for free agency, all of a sudden you don't really have that much cap space, especially if you get Cousins back. So it'll be a redo if they just sign all these guys back, and then it'll basically been what we've been doing since Adolfo Mensa got here. But for the first time since, I'll argue, 2016 or 2017, you're going to go into a Vikings offseason with, you're going to look at the ledger on Over the Cap or Spot Rack and see probably $70 to $80 million if Cousins is not extended. And, Cousins can ball out this year and everybody would, 75% of you would love it. And great, then you can extend him then. However, if it's another one and done in the postseason or one of those wretched 7 and 10, 8 and 9 years, then you finally have the freedom to go in a different direction. So Adolfo Mensa promoting and securing next year's flexibility via the salary cap is my final item of Mount Rushmore. I will be back Monday to discuss whatever Vikings item is on the agenda, and we shall go from there. And then next week, there'll be some reduction in the show load because I'm taking my son to San Francisco for Game 5 of the Lakers and the Warriors. We confirmed there'll be a Game 5 after last night's abysmal Lakers game. However, I'll be back Monday and Tuesday at least for some Viking stuff, and we'll go from there. Skol, baby.